It's the Sports Peninsula podcast coming up. We continue our NFL draft prospect coverage leading up to the April 25th first round start here in Detroit, Michigan. In this episode, we'll look at the interior defensive linemen. This is a very deep class with a lot of day one potential. Will this be a day one option for the Detroit Lions? We'll give our thoughts and break down the top prospects next. Now, here is your Sports Peninsula team. Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Peninsula podcast. My name is Dave Jasinski Drew, and it is Saturday, March 16th. We're only 5 weeks away from the NFL draft, which begins here in Detroit, Michigan on April 25th. We're talking interior defensive linemen, the defensive tackles, and joining me to discuss that and more is Coach Andy Shield of the Marine City Mariners. Coach, how you doing?
Drew, doing well. Spring's abound here. These bright, sunny days, getting a little warmer. That shirt that you're wearing there is going to have a little more significance around here soon, and that's going to be real exciting too. And yes, this event is quickly coming upon us.
Yeah, it's exciting. It reminds me of when the Super Bowl was here back in 2006. That Steelers Seahawks Super Bowl 40. That was pretty cool, and just seeing the preparation downtown. Looking forward to possibly getting down there. We shall see. We might have more to discuss about that in the next few weeks. We'll talk about that. But Coach, a lot has happened in the last week. There's this thing called free agency that opened up this past week, and oh my goodness, just a flurry of movement. Every team eventually did get involved. Eventually, Dallas did make some moves. And here in Detroit, it was a little quiet at the start, and then Brad Holmes made some decisions. And Coach, I think it's going to significantly impact the mindset of this draft going in. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, we spent some money on the defensive side of the football via free agency, adding an edge rusher and Marcus Davenport. And these Brad Holmes he's not the only one that does this. This is actually, you see it around the league, but they're brilliant signings because they're very short term. The terms are 1 or 2 years typically. So it's an in and out. If it's not working or if, there's an issue, there's a kind of a coming and going rather quickly. We saw that with CJ Gardner-Johnson, who's heading back to Philadelphia. The downside of those things is if it's a 1 year deal and there's an injury, a season long injury, you really, it winds up washing out. We re-signed Mosley, who's going to come back and compete for one of those corner spots, and then we made 2 corner signings. And those 2 corner signings, one of which is going to be high impact, and I think it's cornerback 1 really. And that's Carlton Davis. I think he's going to be charged with that. You look at him metrically and just classically in regards to his statistics, and he's shut down. I mean, Jamar Chase is on record saying that he is the toughest defensive back that he's faced. Amik Robertson, is a guy that, I can remember through the draft cycle a little bit, seeing his name pop up. And he was on a steady incline with the Raiders. He started a bunch of games. He put away a Monday Night Football game with a pick in the end zone. He's a nice player and a nice addition. Along with Cam Sutton, along with Brian Branch, and we really we've done some changing there. And then the big addition here just in the last couple of days is perhaps the biggest splash of them all, and that is with DJ Reader signing here. And we really kind of appear to have, at least in a package where we really want to be able to kind of keep things in front of us and stuff the run, DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil, who are also 2 former ACC college baseball players.
Yes, and they were good.
So, I mean, it shows their athleticism too, which is really exciting. So with the addition of DJ Reader, I guess is why I bring this and took so long into that segue, does that change perhaps what we're thinking of at defensive tackle? No, I think we're looking to add at that position group still. I think we need to always be replenishing and recycling there, whether it's at the edge, which is obviously something of importance still too, or on the interior, same thing with it, whether it's tackle or interior offensive line. we're always going to be looking to retool that area in some way, shape, or form, whether it's starters, impact players, or depth. We're going to look to do so. I would still think we're looking at impact and depth. I do not think we're done looking at this position group that we're about ready to talk about.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think what these signings did, other than it very much improved the situation, was it gives Brad Holmes and the brass to the opportunity to sit back and say, okay, who's the football player we like best, and not be pigeonholed into, damn it, we got to draft these 3 or 4 positions or we're in trouble, which is what we've been used to. It's just been really, I'm gonna honestly say, I think last year's the first year they put themselves in a position to think that way. Look what happened. I think this year has shaped up very much so, like you said, going into this, D tackle and cornerback were huge position groups that need to be issued. I agree with you. Still need to look defensive tackle, but I would say they can pick and choose when they want to do that. But what's the beauty of it is, and we're going to talk about it here shortly, this is a deep class. So you don't have to strike on day 1 or early day 2, or else you're out of luck. No, there's a lot to choose from in this class. And I think that's a good segue here, Coach, to start talking about who we're going to be looking at in the defensive line here when the draft comes to Detroit on April 25th. Let's look at that top 20.
Yeah, the SBP top 20, starting from 20 and coming backwards. You have Keith Randolph Jr., another big menacing Illinois defensive tackle. They actually bookend the SBP top 20. We have Illinois defensive tackles, Keith Randolph Jr., tough-looking player. That's a guy that would be a depth piece behind the DJ Reader, because that's the type of player he is. Juwan Briggs from Cincy is a guy that's kind of climbed the ladder, an athletic player. Miles Murphy, another athletic, kind of torquey, product out of North Carolina. We slipped Mohamed Kamara into the defensive tackle fray at 17. He's also an edge player. He's kind of a combo. He's kind of a lighter interior defensive tackle, but boy, can he rush the passer. He's an impressive guy. Keep that guy in mind as somebody that the Lions could be thinking about. You have Tyler Davis from Clemson. It's a guy that's a prospect. He's played a lot of football there. He's at number 16. Been talking about him, or looking at him, for a couple of draft cycles now. Darius Robinson, another edge interior defensive line guy, a player that can play both. He would provide excellent pass rush from the inside and has the ability to play some edge. At 15, we have Darius Robinson, who's a local product. He's a person from your neck of the woods there, Drew. He's a Canton High School graduate. So he's in and around there. He might be a neighbor. You might be able to go to a draft party over at Darius Robinson. You might be able to stumble upon it or something like that. But he's impressive, David. That's a guy to look at, because he's another player like Kamara that can play on the out. He's an edge interior kind of combo. We have Josh Paschal that is very much that, that plays that way as well. He is the type of guy that could really provide there. Justin Aboigbe, he's more of an interior guy from Alabama, but very, very active guy that's a pass rush. Who has some pass rush capability. He's an interesting guy to keep an eye on. Dwayne Carter from Duke, we're going to be talking about him here in a bit. And these are the type of players, I think, that when we're thinking Detroit Lions interior defensive line, that we could be talking about here, this area of the draft. At 12, we have McKinley Jackson from Texas A&M, another guy that we're going to be talking about intimately here. Impressive product, especially against the run. Mekhi Wingo from LSU. He's one of a couple of LSU defensive linemen that are going to get drafted here in Detroit in about a month. Exciting player there. Hitting into the top 10. Mason Smith from LSU. This is another interior D lineman edge combo player. He is massive, 6'6", 315. We're going to be talking about him. Circle him as a guy of interest for the Detroit Lions. Leonard Taylor III from Miami, Florida. Very, very talented, high caliber prospect, very active in the backfield type guy. Braden Fisk, another player we're going to talk about, a former Western Michigan University Bronco, which has a little bit of tenderness in our hearts. Really has climbed the ladder and made a name for himself. Very impressive young prospect there. At 8, Number 7, Michael Hall Jr. This is a guy that's been connected to the Lions. The Lions like him. All he does is make plays in the backfield. Very disruptive factor. Brandon Dorlus is another one of these interior edge combo players, the highest ranked we have of any of those types of players. Although Chris Jenkins qualifies as 1-2, he's going to be primarily an inside guy. Brandon Dorlus, you'll see flexed on both. He's really, really, really good player, and somebody that we could be looking at. Rook Orororo from Clemson via River Rouge High School and Nigeria. Very raw football player that possesses perhaps the best upside athletically out of anybody in this position. And we're talking about a star-studded cast here. Rook Orororo is a name to look out for. Tavondre Sweat. Now, I just wonder with the signing of DJ Reader if his, I guess, type of defensive lineman is something that we're not as high in priority. But folks, to say this is a big man is to making a very, very large understatement. And he's very, very accomplished. This is a technical player. This is a great fit and a guy that's going to play in the NFL, substantive downs early, and have at least his rookie stretch is going to be productive because he's going to be out there. Look out for that name. Chris Jenkins from Michigan. Talk about, I think, every position group we've had a guy from Michigan in the top 10 at least. And this, he's a legacy guy. Dad was a great, great player in the NFL. He had a great, great run at Michigan. He's outstanding against the run. Again, with the signing of Reader, are we looking at this high of looking at a guy like a Chris Jenkins? I'm not sure, but very, very, very good football player. Looking at a first-round grade there. Early second round at the very latest. Into our top 2, Byron Murphy. Now, we just saw the retirement of perhaps the most productive defensive tackle in NFL history yesterday when Aaron Donald decided to retire from the game. He joins Barry Sanders as the only 2 players in NFL history to reach the Pro Bowl all 10 of their years they played. Byron Murphy possesses a skill set that's not dissimilar at all to Aaron Donald. He plays very, very similar. An intriguing prospect to look at. Not going to call him Aaron Donald. There's only one of those. But this is a guy that plays similar. And that takes us to number 1, and the guy we're going to talk about here a little bit more in depth. Drew, is Jerzon Johnny Newton from Illinois, the other Illinois Fighting Illini defensive tackle in our top 20. He is our number 1, and he is one intriguing prospect that is likely to go pretty high in the first round.
Yeah, great job, Coach, breaking these guys down, and we're going to get into detail very soon here. One guy I do want to talk about that we're not going to necessarily highlight here on this show, but Darius Robinson, being local, got a lot of hype pre-combine. I wouldn't say he performed poorly at the combine, but he didn't wow anybody at the combine. And I think that's why he slipped a bit athletically, because a guy like a Braden Fisk helped himself tremendously at the combine. And that's why you see a lot of players that are near the top of the board won't work out at the combine, but they got to do their pro day, but they're going to give themselves some more time, more familiarity. What were your thoughts on Robinson at the combine, Coach?
Yeah, I mean, his twitch was a little bit off. His twitch was a little bit off there. So some of those testing numbers, I'm pretty familiar with that kind of stuff. My son went through a recruiting process for football over the course of 3-4 years, and we did a lot of camps, and they have those kind of combine or showcase, testing type platforms. And, some of it is your performance that day. I mean, you can train and prepare and get technical for these things to really make it pretty consistent, but you still can have an off day. And, unfortunately, he may have been a little bit off. His numbers were a little bit low. Football film can cover that. I mean, there have been other players that have not performed great at their combine or at their testing dates and still were phenomenal players. Terrell Suggs comes to mind. He's a guy that people kind of like, he's on the cusp of all these real athletic, fast, twitchy defensive ends. and his numbers weren't that great. And I'd say he had a pretty nice career. So, I mean,
I'd agree.
You know, the jury's still very much out, you know, and he's definitely gonna get his opportunity. But yeah, those weren't, you know, his time over there at Lucas Oil wasn't probably his greatest football weekend. No.
All right, well, let's get into it, Coach. Let's talk about Johnny Newton out of Illinois, the number 1 prospect on our board. What do you like?
Johnny Newton, number 1 out of the University of Illinois, 6'2", 304-pound junior from St. Petersburg, Florida. He's another one of these guys that's got, you know, he sits at 6'2", 304, 305, 310, and runs a sub 540. He was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year this past season. 2-time All-American, 3-time All-Big Ten selection, 3-time academic All-Big Ten. And that, to me, impresses upon me that he's a very disciplined guy and he's a detail-oriented person. And those types of individuals typically, and you know this as well, being in leadership and manufacturing, I know this from the educational and coaching world, people that are like that typically have success.
Very true.
They're planned and they are strategic in their approach and they are successful. So this really bodes well for Johnny. 188 career tackles, 28 and a half career tackles for loss, 18 career sacks, extremely disruptive player in the backfield with the fighting line. 5 PBUs or pass deflections at the line, 2 forced fumbles and 3 fumble recoveries. So he generated turnovers out of the defensive tackle position, 43 career quarterback pressures, 28 career quarterback hurries. So you look, that's just in not career, I'm sorry, 43 quarterback pressures, 28 quarterback hurries in 2023. So this is a guy that was absolutely a menace and super disruptive in the Big Ten Conference for Illinois for multiple years, and high caliber prospect. This would be a player if somehow would make his way back to it. There's just no way. There's no way. He's going early. It may still be light outside when Johnny Juzon Newton's drafted in Detroit.
Yeah, I can't argue with you, Coach. I would be shocked if he slipped out of the top 10. I don't think he's going top 5. He's going to go between 5 and 10, I believe. He's that good. I mean, he just really is. And the only reason he's not going top 5 is this is a deep quarterback group, and there's a lot of teams that are quarterback needy at the top, and that pretty much sums it up. But what else do you like about him, Coach?
Well, Johnny Newton is very much an Aaron Donald style player. And, you know, we owed to Aaron Donald. Like I said, he may very well be the finest defensive tackle that ever played the game. Johnny Newton has kind of modeled his style of play very much after Aaron Donald. He sheds blocks extremely well. He can quick engage and get off and swing and rip and replace through blocks and destroy blocks extremely well. He's alignment versatile. You can move him around. You can put him inside on the 0 or the 1 technique on top of the center or just inside the just outside the guard, and or just inside head up the guard even in some things in 2 gap, and do some different things that way, which helps you stack and do different things in regards to your blitz and how you bring pressure and those kinds of things. Johnny Newton really can help with that with his alignment versatility and his explosiveness and twitch off the snap, because he's really, really adept at being able to penetrate a gap quickly. You know, large set of pass rush plans and repertoires. He's nuanced in that area for an interior defensive lineman. Really, really effective and good pass rusher. 43 pressures and 28 hurries in 2023 speaks to that. You know, extreme, his agility and quickness and twitch and burst are off the charts. He gets that 4.9 540 from his start and his split. He's outstanding off the ball. And with that, he's also got great natural leverage and anchors well too, if you're trying to run right at him. So, you know, it's not that, you know, and which I think is something that, you know, at his size, he's going to have to make sure that he you know, really refines that and becomes good at that, because that, you know, is really in the end what is asked of a defensive lineman, is to anchor well and be a stone in the middle of the run game. And he can do that very, very well. He's flexible and twitchy enough to play the edge. Is he an every down edge? No, he's probably not an every down edge, but he is a guy that you could, again, he's got that alignment versatility, and you can do some different things, bringing pressures and disguising and stunting and doing different things with him. And he can even do that from the edge and play it, especially from a run standpoint. He's a heavy, heavy hitter, big, heavy hands, very strong stoning punch with those hands, and plays with great, heavy football punch. He really just, he's really, I know checks all the boxes is a cliche that we hear far too often. I promised myself that this season, Drew, that I would not be saying that, every 5 minutes. But you know what, Drew? Johnny checks all the boxes.
He does. He's a stud. He's a type of player. Even we just talked about what the Lions did. If somehow they were able to get him, you drop everything and his name's on the card. It's that simple. You will make room. You will make room for a guy like this. Yeah, Newton's a phenomenal player. And you know what else reminds me of Aaron Donald? And Aaron Donald was drafted in 2014, I think, at pick 11. You know how I know that, Coach? Because the Lions picked at 10.
Who's gonna have him?
Yeah, and well, welcome to Detroit, Eric Ebron. That's how that worked out. But I digress. But he's well thought of. I think he's number one on most defensive tackle boards from most people. He's probably going to go top 10. So very similar in that respect. But Aaron Donald wasn't like at number one on the board in 2014. He was well thought of, but there were other people being talked about more, like a Johnny Manziel and a Odell Beckham Jr. Those guys are getting talked about. There's a lot to like about Newton. There are some things he can work on to get a little better, though, Coach. Let's talk about those.
Well, some of them are things that are going to be tough for him to work on because his size is a legitimate concern. He's 6'2", 300 pounds, which is obviously not a small man by any stretch of the imagination. But he's also going against 6'6", 340 to 350 pound men. Yeah. And really the offensive linemen of today really ranges in between 6'3" and 6'7", and 310 to 350 pounds, 360 pounds. I mean, that's what he will be facing on a weekly basis. So, that is a concern. Is he going to, be a guy that gets washed out at times and just, not able to disengage from those blocks like he did in college, just because of the size differential. His speed rush could get caught by he used that an awful lot. He's able to because he's just so quick and twitchy, and he could just burn a lot of people right out of his stance in his pass rush and use a speed rush type technique. Mm-hmm. That's going to get caught more than the other. And he's got a great repertoire. That's is a strength as well as all the different plans he could have. But that speed rush is not something that might be a go-to that he had in the past. So he's going to have to be refined in that area. He's got shorter arms, which that is a legit concern. And that's something that they look at. Hands and arms is something that these guys look at because, anatomical, physics are anatomical physics. If you're longer and more, you have a greater opportunity to have more leverage and play with more leverage. That is something that he's going to have to be very much on top of. But Aaron Donald had to as well, and he was phenomenal for 10 years. He has gotten washed out and moved around in the run game a little bit. There are clips of that. There are clips. It's not all just, these technically perfect plays and beating people, with his feet and being a superior athlete and with great technique. He does get moved in there a little bit. Okay. There's, that happened. There's the play that Blake Corum made, the big run 2 years ago. He got moved pretty good on that play. So, I mean, there are clips of that. And so is his effectiveness in the run game perfect at this point in time? No, that's going to be a thing that we're going to have to work on. And the other part of that really leads into that. And the last kind of criticism of Johnny Newton is that he's not great against double teams. He does not fight them very well. That's going to be something that they're just going to really, he is going to be tested very quickly by teams, and they're going to run right at him. And that's what he's going to have to answer to. Those are things that are critical. And like you had said, Drew, he's not going to be, one of these considerants that the Bears are scratching their head and biting their nails should they take him at number one over Caleb Williams. No, he is not going in that area quite of the draft. he could go in the top 10. It is possible. It is also possible that he drifts into the teens and towards number 20 because of his size and length concerns. Those are somewhat legitimate.
Kind of reminds me of Cansey from Pitt. We talked
That's
about last
that's another player that he's intimately and explicitly compared to by multiple draft analysts. That they say he's very, very similar. A little bit bigger than that, but very similar.
And he had a solid year last year. I don't have his statistics in front of me, but
he did a nice job with the Bucks. He was good.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, to me, that's the floor for Newton. So that screams first round pick right off the top. So no, excellent breakdown, Coach. A lot to like about Newton. Yeah, the length does concern me. And then the double team. I think double team. I don't doubt he can get stronger, and as smart as he is, he can get. I think they can coach him up and be able to fight some of that off. He may be able to get on a squad where he gets a little help with that too. I don't know, but if you get a guy in the top 15, you kind of want to be that guy that's going to create those problems and be able to make others around him better. So I think that's definitely the big challenge for him. But what a prospect! Very, very much like him a lot. Here's another guy, Coach, Byron Murphy out of Texas. What do you like?
Now, Byron Murphy's a very, very similar style player to Johnny Newton, who we just talked about. Byron Murphy, the second defensive lineman, another alignment versatile player, 6 foot, 297 junior from the University of Texas. 6 foot, 297 is almost like a carbon copy of Kalijah Cansey that we were just talking about. I think that dimensionally they're almost like mirror images of each other. Yeah. Byron is number 2 on the SPP big board. Out of DeSoto, Texas, he runs a 4.87 40 at 6 foot, 300 pounds. So this is another guy that's got phenomenal burst. He has a 455-pound front squat. So, I mean, we're not talking about bridging on the back of our neck and going and breaking parallel and coming up, which those numbers are typically a little bit higher. We're talking about somebody that's got it rested here.
That's impressive.
Doing the same thing.
That's
and keeping
impressive.
it guided. So, I mean, his balance is amazing. Front squats really, really are amazing. Real image of that. That's extremely impressive. 455 front squat. He's an All-American and all Big 12 defensive lineman. He was the Big 12 defensive lineman of the year. So we just talked about the Big 10 defensive lineman of the year and Jazon Newton. Byron Murphy II is the Big 12 defensive lineman of the year. 70 career tackles, 15 career tackles for loss, 8 career sacks, 60 career pressures. So his stats are a little bit more compacted because his body of work might be a little bit smaller. But this is another guy, like I said, very, very similar style player to Johnny Newton, a guy that's extremely disruptive in the backfield.
Yeah, Coach, and this is a guy I don't see being there at 29. I would be surprised if he slipped below 20. I'd be shocked if he slipped past 25. I just think he's that good. And I think the hope the Lions would have as a team, you know, obviously we're near and dear to our hearts here at the Sports Peninsula podcast. You know, a run on quarterbacks, a run on receivers will help bring guys like Byron Murphy down to the 20s and help a team like Detroit out because those aren't positions they're necessarily looking to upgrade, at least in round 1. But what else do you like about Byron Murphy, Coach? Because there's a lot to like. Yes,
there is. And, you know, he's got elite strength and athletic ability. He's very, very tucked up that way. He's obviously a man of the weight room, a man of the training center. He's really, really athletically tucked up that way. Violent punch and press anchor. You know, he is of a smaller stature, even smaller than Johnny Newton, as we had mentioned. But he does play with an excellent anchor for his 6 foot, 300-pound frame. Really violent, angry, quick punch, and he can really press and anchor, really, really well. He explodes off the ball and penetrates the line of scrimmage really quickly. And that's an attribute that we can say about Johnny Newton. We can also say about Byron Murphy. They're very, very similar in that regard. Looked at it, film real closely between the two. And they both play with excellent twitch that way. He's the elite disruptor of the quarterback. This past season, he really was able to kind of, feel the sequence of the pass drop of an offensive line, or the protection of the, steps of the offensive line, and counter that so quickly, and be a guy that was out in somebody in a quarterback's face or pressuring that quarterback often. He was just outstanding at this year. And that really is a thing that's going to, be a feather in his cap, so to speak, when he comes up north of Detroit here in about a month. Great leverage and battler against the run. Again, his feet and his hands are quick. They're in tandem. They're always working. He's excellent technically that way. Another guy that's a lineman versatile, because he is quick and twitchy, even though he's an odd look on the edge. He can go out there and play it a little bit, just because he is so quick. Relentless, heavy, hard-running motor, high football IQ, excellent technician. He's got great technique, can play multiple techniques, multiple alignments on the defensive line. Byron Murphy's going to be one hell of a tool for the team that selects him.
Yeah, I mean, in obvious rushing downs, you can bounce him outside and go bigger inside if you have those options. You certainly love him inside at D tackle position, whether it's the 3 gap or whatever. But at the end of the day, I agree with you, Coach, that you can do a lot of things with him, and he can do it. He can pull it off with that speed, the strength. That the front squat numbers just blows my mind, because that's just a very difficult exercise to pull off with that amount of weight. It just blows my mind how strong he is. So, but there's some things he can work on, right? Let's talk about that.
Well, he has to play with tremendous aggression and explosiveness. He's got to be just on a hairpin trigger at all times because of his size differential. And, he's going to be guilty of over-aggression at times, and it's going to lead to over-penetration and overrunning plays. And he's going to play out of his technique sometimes that way. And, that's a very common error for a football player to make that plays in the front. So they play too far upfield. They explode too much. They crash too hard. They commit too much to a certain, feeling or read or key. And they overcommit, and he will be guilty of that a little bit. And that's just going to happen a little bit. His lack of size is more of a concern than it even is for Juzon Newton. He's 6 foot 300 pounds. Kalijah Cansey, who we had mentioned earlier, is a guy that was selected by Tampa Bay later, a little bit later, because of those size concerns, and he was electric. He was very good. He kind of reminded people that Aaron Donald player. I am guessing the Lions probably selected Eric Ebron greatly in part because they thought Aaron Donald was a bit too small. That is something that's going to probably be a question that many, scouting, groups and for organizations are talking about. Yeah. He is of smaller stature. He's going to have to refine his hand placement to maintain that effectiveness at the NFL level. He was very effective and very good, but he's going to have to be is even technically greater than he is, because otherwise he'll be really washed down and pinned in on a lot of things. Can't just rely on his athleticism so much. He's elite. He's got elite athleticism, but he's going to have to become a very technically strong football player and enhance that part that he has as part of his foundation coming in from Texas. And the question's really going to remain, and that's what we're going to either see him get picked by a team that really doesn't feel it's an issue, or we're going to see him slide back a little bit and maybe, into the 20s, like you had mentioned. Can he dominate again in the run against the NFL or in the NFL? We made a great commitment to that. We want to make teams one-dimensional here in Detroit, and we want to make them quarterback centric. So we now, we went out and gave some money to an elite run stuffer. That is the defensive lineman that really has the greatest longevity in this league. Can Byron Murphy be one of those guys? He's going to have to answer that pretty quickly, or we're talking about a short order player.
Yeah. And the thing is, speaking for myself, Coach, though, I like so much of what he brings to the table that I'm likely going to overlook that for the most part and take a chance on him in round 1. because I like so much of what he brings to the table. But let me ask you this: in your study, can you ballpark how much you saw the overaggression? I mean, was it that prevalent, or is it just something that it happens infrequently, but it will happen? Or is it something you were seeing like 20-25% of the time, as an example?
Most of the stuff that I saw, that he was very calculated. He was very, very on top of it. They were more worried about him than he was worried about anything out there. And you see that a lot of times in highlight films. I looked a little bit more exclusively in his CFP semifinal game versus Washington, where Dylan Johnson did rip a couple of things, and Penix was able to kind of free up himself too a couple of times, where he did get pinned. He got hooked in. You know, we were talking about Troy Fontenot, and then there's Roger Rosengarten. They had a couple real good offensive linemen there in Washington, and he got worked a couple times by those guys. He is going to get blocked. And when he comes up to this level, when you have the talent, the size, and the technical refinement of a professional offensive lineman, veteran professional offensive lineman that is NFL caliber, the risk or the likelihood that he is going to have difficulty is just high, because he's 6 foot, 300 pounds. Yep. You know, he's just not. 30 years ago, that's a real big, thick anchor of a defensive lineman. Today, that's tiny. That's tiny. The weight, not so much, but the length and size, you know, he's just going to have to establish himself and really refine his hands and really refine his anchor as a defensive lineman. If he can do those things, he's very, very legitimate, going to play for a long, long time.
If his explosiveness can compensate for his lack of size, yeah, he's gonna be a very good player and an excellent first round pick. Totally agree with you, Coach. Like Byron Murphy a lot. If he's there at 29, that's a huge if. He's gonna be considered. There's no doubt about that. He will be very much considered, even with the recent signings. It's exciting, but I wouldn't count on him being there. I think he's gonna go a little sooner, but we shall see. We shall see.
At the number 3 spot in the SPP defensive line big board is Chris Jenkins from the University of Michigan. Another guy that we've talked about, and this is a great player. He's had a great career in Ann Arbor. 6'3", 299-pound senior. He's a legacy guy. Dad was a fine NFL football player. He comes out of Olney, Maryland, a 4'9", 140 at 6'3", 299. So another guy that really runs well. He ran a 4.33 pro shuttle, which his change of direction and his ability to move laterally is extremely impressive for a man of his size. He's an All-American and a 2-time All-Big Ten selection, team captain of the 2024 NCAA National Championship football team. He's a team captain of Team 144. So this is a highly esteemed football leader as a young man as well. 112 career tackles, 8 career tackles for loss, 38 career quarterback pressures. So those numbers, they seem sturdy. They're not maybe as juicy as Johnny Newton's and maybe some other guys that we're going to talk about. But what Chris Jenkins brings to the table is elite fundamental defensive line play. This, and I think many other estimations, and I looked on prospects on YouTube and looked at some of his coaching cut-ups. Mm-hmm. This is the best run anchor in this draft. You want to improve your run defense. You want to be a better run defending football team. Chris Jenkins would be a really, really, really wise draft pick for you.
He is special. Obviously, being up here near Ann Arbor, we get to see him a lot. Absolutely love what we saw, Coach. Yeah, he does the things well that aren't necessarily not in the traditional stat sheets. Certainly now with the deeper analytics, we get to see a little more of this, which is how it's really eye-opening. That there's a lot of good things that athletes do on the field or on the ice or the court, wherever the case may be, and then you can see more. You get to put something tangible to it to track it, and that's really the cool thing about analytics. But that's where Chris Jenkins really excels against the run. What else do you like about him?
Well, he's another one of these products of the LA Chargers strength and conditioning coaches Ben Herbert's program. This is a guy that really is teched up from that standpoint. He's one of the strongest players in the draft. He just amazingly built player, and his strength of balance is perhaps the finest in the position group, perhaps the finest in the draft in many ways. He's like I really believe, just from his body of work, he's the draft's premier run stopper, and that includes about a guy that we're going to talk about here down the road, which I know a lot of people like to put credit to. I think this guy is that. He's got an elite NFL ready run anchor. He's going to come in there and be able to get substantive reps right away in the run anchor. It's going to be about if he can make plays. That's really, and that part he's going to have to answer to. It's going to be, is he going to be able to affect enough plays to be the true defensive line prospect that's got him here at number 3 on our big board. Strong, quick punch. He gets great leverage. He gets great leverage and can move underneath it and replace himself within the line of scrimmage, which is so important to gap ownership and block destruction, which really ultimately feeds a good defense in football. He is phenomenal against double teams. We talked about Johnny Newton struggling with those a little bit, Byron Murphy struggling with those a little bit. Chris Jenkins does not. He's great technically against them. He does a great split and anchor. He can make himself small. He can make himself, rigid. He can tangle those up and collapse the entire scheme. Very, very good against double teams. Just he destroys blocks excellently. I mean, you can't ask for a guy that's probably more ready for that in the NFL, or for the NFL than any player in the draft in this position group than Chris Jenkins. Very technically strong, gritty, physical. Physical and alignment versatile. What more is there to like? I mean, he can do all those things for you. He can get out there on the edge and kind of anchor for you. He's not going to be a great pass rusher there. And he is not a tremendous pass rusher in general. We'll get to that a little bit more here in a minute. He is not going to make a ton of plays in the backfield. He's disruptive in the backfield and can stone a play. Not going to be making a lot of tackles, a lot of TFLs, a lot of sacks, QB pressures. Those numbers might be juicier in other players. Chris Jenkins is more impressive as a fundamental defensive tackle.
Yeah, I think you said it best right there. And that's why he's probably not a day one guy, but talent wise and what he brings to the table, he's absolutely a day one talent. But I think because those sexy numbers, the QB pressures, the sacks, things like that aren't there, that gives not so much pause of the player, but you start talking about draft slot value. And I think that's where Chris Jenkins gets hurt a little bit. But what can he work on, Coach, to make things right?
If you're looking for a run anchor and you really, really need a run anchor on your defense, he could be a day one solution because he might do that. He does it finer than anybody in this draft at this position. But what he does not bring to the table, Drew, is the ability to rush the passer like some of the other prospects do. He's not, he's a basic bull rusher. He's going to push pocket. Now, again, he's extremely strong. And if somebody's banged up, early on in his career and he's just stronger and more athletic than, the offensive, the guard that he's facing, or there's a scheme where he's able to kind of pinch and crash down hard and really use that bull rush technique and physically dominate a player. Okay, so be it. He's going to pressure and collapse the pocket a little bit and push the pocket. Outside of that, there's a lot of work to do, and we're developing a pass rush repertoire. It doesn't have a really, really interesting one there, other than when he's looped and twisted and stunted. Because he's very good at those things. He's excellent. He got great twitch and great lateral movement, but those are some things that he's got to be able to work on. The further away he gets off the ball, the less explosive he becomes. So when we're talking, he gets out to the edge, we're talking about a pretty meat and potatoes edge. He's going to run anchor, and that's about what he's going to be able to do for you. So the further away he gets, he's maybe not quite as disruptive in those kinds of things. He's going to need to refine that technique so he can be that double team stalwart that he was at the college level. Because that is something that's going to be a real, nice piece, to his chessboard is being able to be an elite double team player. If he can do that, that's something to call it a weakness. We put it under weakness. It's not a weakness. It's a strength of his, but that's something that he's going to really want to work to enhance so that he can be that's going to be his signature as an NFL player. And he can be a little bit of what we call a stalemate player, which basically takes an offensive lineman out and a defensive lineman out. Now it's 10 on 10. Okay. Does that really help us? Well, we obviously want to treat, in football, you want to create a numbers game. You want your defensive players being better than a side's or an area's offensive players, right? Taking one out for another, well, now we're depending on those other players being better. So we're not talking about a guy that's going to he's going to make your unit better against the run. That's what he's going to do. Outside of that, is he going to make a ton of plays? He's going to make less plays than many other defensive tackles do. Is he going to make enough plays? That's a question that we can ask about Chris Jenkins. Is he just going to be so quiet on the play front that his impact is not felt that much in that area? That you still need to be able to produce. Like we had said at the onset of Chris Jenkins here, you got to put up some numbers too. You got to rush the passer. You've got to be somewhat disruptive and hit home on some tackles too.
Yeah, you nailed it. If Chris Jenkins is going to be a very solid NFL player and probably have a 10+ year career, what's going to determine whether he's a first-round draft pick is whether a team sees that we have the setup that Chris Jenkins, we can plug a guy like this in and he's going to excel here for at least 5 years. That's where I think you'll see it just in terms of draft positioning. But as a player, yeah, absolutely. He's going to be a very, very stout run anchor. Love him there. Being 6'3", he's got a little more height to him than when we talked about Murphy. So I really like that. And you touched on his lateral movement, Coach. He's pretty special moving laterally. That's what makes him so good against the run. He's frustrating in that regard because he's always in your face and he's difficult to move. So looking for good things from Chris Jenkins in the NFL. Let's talk about number 4. And I love this guy, T'Vondre Sweat.
Oh, the SPP big board loves him too. After film study, we had to go against the data and move him up to number 4. He was that impressive with his football film over the course of his career and body of work that he has on there. T'Vondre Sweat. This is now we're talking about the big dogs here. Another defensive tackle out of the University of Texas. Byron Murphy II was the first one we had highlighted. 6'4", 366 from Huntsville, Texas, a senior. Moves up to number 4 defensive line prospect for the SPP big board. He was the 2023 Outland Trophy winner for the best lineman in football. He won it. So this is a guy that had one heck of a senior season at Texas and was voted by a group as the best lineman in the game. 2023 consensus All-American across the board. 2-time All Big 12 player. He was the 2023 Big 12 defensive lineman of the year this past year. He had that with his teammate Byron Murphy II. They were the co-defensive lineman of the year from the same school. Wow. 128 career tackles, 17.5 career tackles for loss, 14 career pass deflections, 79 career stops, and 86 career quarterback pressures. So he's been very, very active. He's very, very, very disruptive player for the University of Texas. But this is a guy that some are going to disagree with this person's opinion that this is the best run anchor in the draft, and it's not even close. Not Chris Jenkins. I have a little bit of a different opinion because of what Chris Jenkins can do laterally and do some different things within some schemes and being a little more scheme versatile. But Drew, T'Vondre Sweat is a legit prospect and an extremely impressive one at that. And if you need a run anchor, and if you need a guy that is going to just swallow space, occupy blockers, and collapse blocking schemes, you have a guy in T'Vondre Sweat.
Yeah, and if you have a day 2 pick, you need to consider him because he is something else. I mean, I immediately, as a Lions fan, you think of Snacks, right? And that kind of player, that kind of size. But I do agree with you, Coach. In the sense that I like the fact that you can do a little more with Jenkins, and Jenkins brings a little more versatility to the table. But in terms of how they stop the run, yeah, Jenkins is right with him, but Sweat's a special player against the run. Let's talk about what else you like.
Well, he's got a great body. He's played a lot of football in college, 62 games for Texas. So that's, he's a well-experienced player. You're getting in a rookie, a guy that's played a lot of football. His size, it's 6'4", 366. I mean, is there any? We can't really get better in the draft, at least in this draft, the defensive tackle size. With that, I mean, that's amazing. He's a classic space eater, as you would compare to Damon Snacks Harrison, and Alan Branch, those type of guys. Phenomenal upper body punch and control. I mean, he at the college level, he just kind of was a man amongst boys and just kind of bullied himself and just latched on and anchored himself anywhere he wanted. And he does have impressive hand usage. That right there tells you he's NFL ready. He's NFL ready right now. Very violent puncher. He can really throw hips through his hands and generate that kind of power that you're expecting out of a 6'4", 366-pound man. He uses a lot of torque, a lot of push-pull type things to be somewhat of a disruptor in the pass game. He's got that is his pass rush repertoire, is doing a lot of torque moves and kind of repositioning an offensive lineman and doing it through attacking, so then he can counter it with another move and come right over the top of and create problems in the backfield as a pass rusher. Really, really works hard. That's going to kind of lead to some of the things that we talk about here in the red for T'Vondre Sweat too, but he plays relentlessly, which is obviously a great strength and something that's going to be asked of him. His hands and technique allow him to be a phenomenal natural run anchor. Not just his size alone. He's in there anchoring and playing with his hands, violent punch, extending, destroying blocks, stepping through, squeezing down, all the things that you need from a defensive lineman that he already does, and he'll come to an organization with those skills. Really, really intriguing guy, and honestly, we likely have an opportunity to be seen definitely at 29. I think the last two players we just talked about, I just don't know if that's going to be that pressing need at 29. I think the last two players are guys that we could be talking about at 29. Chris Jenkins could go sometime in the 20s. It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
T'Vondre Sweat could too, because he's just so impressive with his size and what you're going to get as an anchor interior run defender. I don't know if it's quite the priority as it was, but boy, he would be something else if there was one to consider, because you add him to the fray, where we are really deep in the run anchors.
Yeah, that's I have probably problems even really fathoming it, to be honest with you, Coach, to have that much versatility and depth at the D-line for the Lions, and for the NFL in general. I just love what Sweat can do well. But what does he need to work on, or what are his limits?
Like Chris Jenkins, he's a limited pass rusher. He's kind of got a bull rush technique that he's really good. He does have like the torque moves, like the push pull and some of the twisting and getting balance broken for the offensive lineman, breaking down the balance of the pass blocker, but he just doesn't have that much foot speed. He's not able to chase and arc down players from behind too often. And that's where, that speed and quickness kind of make him just kind of that push-pull interior guy. He's got to develop a little bit more into that pass rush repertoire. That's something that he's just going to have to be able to do. But honestly, I think we are talking about a prospect that is a little bit further down the line than some of these other defensive linemen that we've talked about. Because I do think he's going to come off the field in pass rush situations and passing downs and known or really believed passing plays. If they can get him off the field, they will, because he plays so hard and relentlessly, Drew, that that's a big gas guzzling body, and for that motor, 6'4", 366. I know I've said that a million times in talking about T'Vondre Sweat, but he's going to slow down. He's going to burn up. He's going to need to come off the field and recharge the battery, so to speak, a little bit more than maybe a Byron Murphy, his teammate, who is 6'2", 297 and a little bit more teched up athletically from a conditioning standpoint, just by natural ability. What he brings to the table is so important, but it burns up quick. It uses a lot of fuel. And he slows down. His hands slow down and loses effectiveness as he wears down. He's going to have to come off the field at times, Drew. And that's probably going to impact his draft slot too a little bit. But what he brings to the table, and that's why he'd be perfect as an understudy for the McNeils and the Readers of the world, and be a guy that can come in and give them a break. And get him back out and then work him up through what he could ever be is kind of like maybe a true nose guard one day. You got one heck of a player, T'Vondre Sweat.
Yeah, I coupled that with big Broderick Martin too, was drafted last year, and that's
what exactly. We kind of have that player in Broderick Martin. We kind of do. So again, I think with Reader added, T'Vondre Sweat, I wonder if they still are intimately interested or linked to him, because that is a name that the Lions did interview. They do like him, but nonetheless, we're gonna hear and see him play NFL football.
Oh yeah, and he's gonna play well too. I think we'll hear a lot about him over the years, Coach. It's gonna be good. So I like T'Vondre Sweat a lot. And day 2, I mean, round if he's there at round 3, Lions got to seriously consider him. I don't know if he'll even be there when they pick in round 2. I'm not sure. But a fine talent, and a good job on covering him, Coach. Let's talk about our number 5 prospect, Rook Orohoro. Coach, that's a difficult name, but he's a very good football player. Let's talk about him.
You can tell you did your homework, Drew, because that slipped off your tongue like nobody's better business.
Only said it 12 times before the show.
Rook Orohoro was a player that we had slated through our data process as the number 4 defensive line prospect, and we've slid him down to 5 just because of what T'Vondre Sweat really showed, his ability to control offensive linemen at the college level. But Rook Orohoro is defensive tackle so he's a positional specific player on the interior defensive line out of Clemson University, 6'4", 294 senior, so he's got some nice size to him. He comes from Lagos, Nigeria. He's Nigerian, but he came into the McNamara terminal when he moved to Detroit. So he's a Detroit prospect.
Excellent.
This is a local. So near and dear. Now, okay, to the Detroit Lions, maybe, you never know. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But this is a Sports Peninsula podcast, local. He's a River Rouge High School product. He played for the great coach, Corey Parker, who's now the secondary coach at the University of Toledo, who really developed Quinion Mitchell into the player that he is, and that's going to be drafted. Rook Orohoro played high school football for that guy at River Rouge High School. So that's kind of a neat parallel that we can make there. 4'8", 40 at 6'4", 294. So an amazing athlete. 2-time All-ACC selection for the Clemson Tigers. 88 career tackles, 25 and a half career tackles for loss, 12 career sacks, 9 career pass deflections, 8 tackles for loss each of the last 3 seasons. So this has been a guy that has been tremendously disruptive and impactful as a tackler in the run game, or even against quarterbacks that have committed to the run. He has been really, really tough on that. This is a guy who can make plays in the backfield. We just talked about 2 defensive linemen that their play making may not be more of what they do and they destroy blocks. This is now Rook Orororo is in that vein of Murphy and Newton as a play-making defensive tackle.
Yeah, he's definitely a talent, and the better he gets, and I believe he will get better. He'll become well. People will know him on a first name basis, like they know Tua, because that last name is going to short circuit him a little bit. So Rook, you'll hear a lot of Rook around, but you want to hear him in your stadium because if he's on your team, he's a hell of a football player. Coach, what else do you like about him?
Well, we've had now a really a full generation, maybe even 2 generations of prospects coming out of the continent of Africa and developing there. I mean, the football is something that is, for kids that have tried, that have been kind of the body type, have really adapted to pretty well from African countries. And part of it is, his work, his dedication in the weight room is elite. He is a guy that's going to commit that way. So that really is probably a sigh of relief for a lot of NFL franchises. You're going to get a guy that's going to become a pro real quick. He is going to really commit and stay committed in that area. Real strong athletic frame, real strong athlete. He checks the box of an NFL athlete. Great, strength, quickness blend. Really high level there. Probably similar to the Murphys, the Jenkinses, the Newtons in that area. Because he's athletic, he's alignment versatile. You can get some edge work out of him. He almost can arc the quarterback a little bit. He's not as athletically talented to be out there on an every down basis, but you can do some things with Rook Orororo, even on the edge. He's not just strictly an inside guy. He does have a little bit of that versatility. He's a very consistent, strong run anchor. It's quite consistent. Is it his great forte? We'll talk about that here in a minute. But, that's still kind of developing. But he's got a very consistent run anchor. He can really hang in there. He's a secure tackler. Those numbers that he shot off, with 25 and a half career tackles for loss kind of speaks to that. If he gets in front of you and he gets his hands on you, or he bodies you up, or he can track his body to your hip, you're going down. He's taking you down. He's extremely high volume and high percentage tackler. Another guy that plays fast and furious, highly competitive. He knows only one way. It's the Corey Parker way. It's how he developed as a player. Corey Parker is an absolutely high octane coach, great coach. Corey Parker is a guy. I know it's not the Corey Parker show, but you're going to hear about him. He's going to be a guy that moves and shakes and does things in football as a coach. And he trained Rook Orororo real well from a football player's mentality. He's super powerful at the point of attack. Drew, this is a day 2 pick. Potentially, some people may even see him late day 1 because of his athletic prowess and ability to make some plays. Rook Orororo is extremely intriguing because he could bring an element of playmaking ability to that defensive line. We need to get better against defending running quarterbacks from a talent standpoint. Look no further.
Yeah, that's important, and more, not just a Lion thing, but that's more important for the league because the quarterback position is evolving. The better quarterbacks in the league, and we've talked about this at length, especially when we early on debating about whether Jared Goff was truly going to be the answer here in Detroit because he's not a running quarterback. Of course, he does a lot of things well that overcome that, but most of the quarterbacks now that are in the top 10, they all can run. So you've got to have an answer for it. And yeah, that exactly. Look no further than Rook here. But what does he need to work on, Coach, to step his game up to the next level in the NFL?
Well, the other 4 prospects that we've really talked about have just tremendous technique and are very savvy that way. They have a lot of football in them. Rook doesn't have as much football. And he just hasn't played it as long. He isn't as quite technically developed as a Tavondre Sweat, as a Chris Jenkins, as Murphy, or as Newton. He's got to develop that. And that it is a weakness, but it's something that can be worked on, right? You get great coaching and tutelage. He could really, that could be kind of erased rather quickly. But he's going to get leveraged and pinned and washed out and moved around a little bit because he's just his techniques. he doesn't destroy blocks quite as well as some of the other prospects do. He doesn't destroy blocks all that well yet. So that's something that's going to be kind of an area that needs to get quick and better and better quickly. He does not have the most developed pass rush repertoire. He relies on great athleticism to rip and replace or just burst off the ball and arm over and get himself deep into the hip of the blocker and into the backfield and making plays that way. Not going to be that easy. It's not the ACC. It's the NFL. And, that's going to be more difficult. And that's going to be a part of his development that he needs to work on quite a bit more too. His hand striking needs to be more consistent. It's just not this. He does not do that like Sweat and like Jenkins do, or he does not do that like Jazon Newton or Byron, his teammate, or I'm sorry, Byron Murphy, not his teammate, but Byron Murphy. He just those are things that, and he doesn't do that as well as some other people that we're going to talk about after him too. He's just going to have to become more consistent and technical to be a near every down NFL football player, because at his ceiling he could be. At his ceiling he could be a near every down player. But his pad level is high. These are all things that are correctable and teachable. But Rook Ororo has just got a little ways to go in that standpoint.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Coach. I think that's what makes him a day two guy, but it makes him a very intriguing day two guy with a high ceiling upside, because the things he needs to work on, like you're talking about, being his number one strength, being dedicated, being a dedicated workout guy. I get that's the weight room, but it also means the work ethic's there and the coach abilities there. Coach Parker, Coach Sweeney at Clemson, he's had some good tutelage there, even though he hasn't been exposed to the game as long as some of the others. But there's a lot of upside for Ororo, and I'm looking forward to seeing him play in the NFL. Wouldn't shed a tear if it was with the Detroit Lions. I can tell you that right now.
Certainly come back here.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very good prospect. Interesting guy. Let's talk about our number 6 prospect, Coach Brandon Dorlus.
Well, Brandon Dorlus is one of a couple of guys like we had talked about when we highlighted the top 20 on the SPP big board for D linemen. That is a combo player. A lot of we said defensive linemen. These are we talk about them being defensive linemen and not just a defensive tackle or a nose tackle, because they're not. They get moved around. They're alignment versatile. Yeah. We're really going to highlight that with Brandon Dorlus, because he's really shown and for a snaps, breakdown, to be equal parts edge and interior defensive lineman. 6'3", 283 senior out of the University of Oregon. So he's a little bit lighter. You can see that he has been tasked with being more of an edge at times, but he is our number 6 defensive line prospect because he plays enough interior defensive lineman that we wanted to rate him and analyze him from that standpoint too. And he pops out at number 6 on the SPP big board. Fort Lauderdale, Florida native, another freak athlete, 6'3", 283 that runs a 4.85 40. 3-time all Pac-12 selection player. So he's prolific. Had a prolific career in Eugene for the Ducks. 106 career tackles, 27 career tackles for loss, 12 career sacks, 13 career pass deflections, 60 career stops, 102 career quarterback pressures out of a guy that played the amount of football that he did. He was an inside and out nightmare as a pass rusher for Oregon during his career as a college football player.
That's a crazy statistic right there. 102 pressures in his career. That is something else. He can definitely get off the ball, Coach. A lot to like about Brandon Dorlus. What else do you like about him?
Elite athlete. He's probably the quickest, fastest from a twitch, out of stance, and run standpoint as any player in this position group in this draft. He's been clocked over 20 miles per hour in gameplay before.
Wow.
This is a guy that can really move, especially for a defensive tackle. Extremely disruptive pass rusher. Really brings an element to your game there, which is intriguing for the Detroit Lions, because that's something that we're really trying to improve within our defense. He's got a high octane hot rod motor. I mean, he is, feet are a buzzing, hands are a buzzing, mouth is a buzzing. He's ready to go. He wants to play football. He wants to get after it. heavy skilled punch and press ability, so he can really anchor in there and do some of those things that Chris Jenkins does well, and Tavondre Sweat does well. He can punch and anchor, and that's why he is the defensive line prospect that he is, because he does that quite well and kind of destroy blocks and be a disruptive player as a run anchor too. Dense but plays long and leveragey. That's why he's so effective on the edge. He's a moving, mobile, liquid edge. He can not get reached. He can help pin the stretch plays and the perimeter stuff. He can squeeze down and boss and condense and crush down and crash down interior run plays from the edge too. So if he can do that well, he can do that well as an interior defensive lineman. He's an absolute menace as a pass rusher for a defensive lineman. So he has all these versatile things that he does, and on top of it, yeah, he does have a good run anchor. You can do the plain Jane, meat and potatoes defensive line stuff that's uber important and really of the most significance and importance to an interior defensive lineman is his run anchor. He does that really well. He's got really, really explosive, heavy punch. This is a guy that I think, because he's tweener, he slides a little bit, but boys, this is an interesting prospect. And this is a guy I think we circle too. This is a defensive line prospect that we could still look at if we do some more work with the interior offensive lineman, and it's not near the precedent that we need to look at. This could be a guy at 29. This guy right here could be a guy at 29 to look at right now.
He's a very interesting player, and I found myself having to look, probably I would say borderline nitpick in some cases, to try and find some things that maybe need to be worked on, or buyer beware, whatever we want to call it. But what did you see, Coach?
Well, we're going to be featuring the edge position here shortly in the next couple of episodes. And, in comparison to those types of players, that we'll be talking about, the Dallas Turners and the Chris Braswells and those guys, he is limited in explosiveness he's not nearly as dynamic as an edge player as he is an interior defensive lineman. That's why we're talking about him right now. Yeah. He can run fast, but he doesn't process all that fast. So, he's a guy that his athleticism is very important to him, because it takes him a little while to be able to respond. He's not as read and react maybe as some other guys are. Rook Orororo has to be a read and react guy and has really thrived off of that, very similar to Brandon Dorlus. Brandon Dorlus is going to have to become a better processor to be a better block destructor in the NFL. He can play a little upright and tight especially on the edge. Especially on the edge a little bit. It's most noticeable as a pass rusher on the edge, which he's also effective. But it's more from the interior that you see the things of great promise from Brandon Dorlus. He can be over aggressive, and that has to do with that. He was tasked to move all over the front for Oregon, and sometimes you can get a little unsound, when it comes to that kind of thing. You can get a little over aggressive and overrun things. You will see that from Brandon Dorlus. And that athleticism, again, he was out there a lot. He played a lot of football for Oregon. As games wore on and we got into the second and the third quarters and the fourth quarters, some of that productivity kind of slowed down, and we would be maybe getting into some more stalemates and those kinds of things, and really not affecting too much change. So the switch can get turned off a little bit from a standpoint of his productivity as he wears down. So is Brandon Dorlus an every down guy? He could work himself into that, but he's probably a package player and a rotational piece, but a real versatile one that's truly going to help out somebody's defensive line room.
Yeah, so he's a guy that, like you said, the Lions could consider him at 29. He could be day 2, round 3. It's going to depend on the general manager and the team fit, but I mean, there's no denying the athleticism. There's no denying that, and no denying that he's going to be a very effective defensive lineman. But like you said, Coach, he doesn't have a niche per se, but a lot to like about him, and to be that versatile. Versatility is the name of the game now anymore, right? At most positions. So you've got to be able to bring a couple things to the table in your bag of tricks. And I think Brandon Dorlus does that well. So he's going to be a fun one to watch in the NFL. Nice prospect. Coach, we're into the dark horse candidates, and we've got a lot of good ones to talk about. I think you're kicking this one off. Let's start with you.
Yeah, we talked about the players that, typically we trickle down through the draft, and some of the times our dark horses kind of align that way too, and we wind up talking about guys that are maybe borderline day 2, day 3 guys. Michael Hall Jr. is a guy that is going to kind of work his way up into things, and this is somebody that you could actually see late day 1, definitely into day 2, and another name that you need to think about when it comes to Detroit Lions, because this is a home run hitting defensive tackle prospect out of The Ohio State University, 6'3", 290-pound junior. He's an Ohio native from Streetsboro. He's a 4-star prospect recruited by Ryan Day and company. He's an all Big Ten selection, 45 career tackles, 10 career tackles for loss, 6 sacks, 28 career stops, 38 career quarterback pressures. So those numbers aren't as juicy as what we have seen. His body of work is a little bit smaller than some other players is. But what he does is he is kind of a Swiss Army knife type defensive lineman. He's long enough to help you on the edge. He's athletic enough to help you on the edge. He's athletic enough to kind of play the 5 technique, which is kind of the hybrid 3-4 DND tackle type spot. He can be a true 3 technique interior defensive tackle. And he could also play from the inside at the what they call the 0 and 1 techniques, which is more of what you would refer to as a nose guard. You can move him all around the front. He plays with top end speed and quickness. Top end speed and quickness. This is a sub package nightmare. This is a guy that can be like lightning in a bottle out there in a really, really good looking frame. He's got low center of gravity, which gives him a great run anchor. Is he an every down run anchor? Not yet, but he can definitely give you some there. He'll be ready to go when it comes time in September to get things going. He can play with excellent leverage inside and out. So, I mean, he plays with good inside leverage, which helps against zone, and he can work out into the perimeter and help out there too. So, again, he's very alignment versatile and position versatile. He can be really a disruptive penetrator against the run. Real pain in the butt. He's a guy that's just he's going to beat past and get past blocks and reduce and squeeze down, make plays in the backfield. Plays with great strength in the run game. He's a good stunter. So you can do a lot of stunting and twisting and blitzing and movement schemes within your defense with him. Hard, heavy running motor. Great looking football player. The Lions like him. I know that it's been kind of alluded to through some of our beat stuff that we have here locally, that the Lions have been connected to Michael Hall Jr. They like what he brings to the table. As far as what could he do, or what are some things, or why is he kind of not maybe at the top of the board? Well, he does have some, his arm length is not tremendous. Is he going to be able to leverage consistently in the NFL? Can he be an every down defensive lineman? That's one of the biggest questions that really comes along with Michael Hall Jr. As athletic as he is, he's maybe not as explosive and dynamic as a Jerzon Newton, as a Byron Murphy, as a Ruka Rororo. Is he in that caliber? Probably not. It's a little bit pegged down. He's kind of in between. Is he kind of a big, thick edge, or is he an athletic defensive lineman? What is he? So he's a little bit of a tweener. He's more of an offensive tackle than he is any kind of an edge player at the NFL, but he's still kind of a tweener in size. Got to refine technically. Look at his body of work. You can tell. He doesn't have the miles on him that some other players do, but he doesn't have the experience some other players do too, and that comes with that territory as well. Michael Hall Jr.'s got a little ways to go in that area.
Yeah, and day 2, round 3 would be very, very pleased if he was on the board still when the Lions are picking. I can tell you that right now. That's my perspective on him. Really like Michael Hall Jr. a lot. It's a good dark horse coach. Let's talk about Braden Fisk out of Florida State University. And this is a guy, he's from Michigan City, Indiana, former Western Michigan Bronco, like Coach talked about earlier when we introduced our top 20. This is a guy, 6'5", 300-pound senior. He ran a 4.7 840. This is a guy that helped himself out tremendously at the combine. Like what we see on film, Love what we see athletically. He really helped himself a lot. Played 5 years at Western. He was all MAC at Western, had 148 tackles, 27.5 for loss, and 13.5 sacks at his time at when he played at Western Michigan. All-American at FSU. So to be an elite MAC player, go to Florida State in the ACC, be elite there. That's something to look at. All ACC player, 43 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks last year at Florida State. 120 career stops and 110 career quarterback pressures. This guy he looks meat and potatoes, but he's really pretty dynamic athletically, to be honest with you. And why do we like him? Well, he's got a great first step and quick hands. And with that speed, that 4.78 40 speed, it works very well. He's a very good zone block destructor, so that's very important. He's really remarkable blend of size and speed, because to be 6'5", 300, and he's a little taller, a little more upright than some of the guys we've talked about. With that 300-pound frame, still he's able to do a lot of good things. So that's why we really like him too. Elite speed for a D lineman, excellent movement skills. He's got a diverse pass rush repertoire, so that's important. He brought that to the table from Western Michigan, coach, and then he brings it to Florida State, and he excelled there. So he definitely got coached up over at Kalamazoo, that's for sure. Great physicality at the point of attack. He's very good against double teams, very important, and has just a relentless motor. He chases plays down, and when you can run a 4.78 40, you're pretty good at that, especially when you're a 300-pounder. What does he need to work on? So pad level can get high. Again, when you're 6'5", that's going to be a challenge. So that's something he definitely wants to work on. And again, refining the block destruction for impact in NFL level. Excelled at it in the MAC, was very good at it in Florida State. Needs to be very good at it still in the NFL to be able to keep progressing his career like we see it. And we really see a lot of a bright future for Braden Fisk. But he needs to play with more consistent technique. And again, when you're more upright, you tend to play a little more top heavy. And you see from the picture, I mean, he's got a big frame, but he's definitely got a thicker upper body. So I think that's something he probably needs to be aware of, coach, and maybe getting his legs a little stronger. What do you think of Fisk?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that, we had this guy over at Western, and to be just you look at him just with that bully technique against Southern Miss right there, and anchoring on an inside, and and pinning and playing great zone fit right there. And what he was able to hit at Florida State. And it's just amazing that he was over there, and he didn't, connect with more success, I guess. It is rather kind of amazing. I'm really pulling for him. He's a great built athlete. He's really built and put himself into a phenomenal position. His athleticism is NFL caliber. Is he going to be able to play from a technical standpoint, refine, like you said? He's going to have to get probably a little thicker, even yet, maybe get himself in about that 320 range, getting that his anchor kind of figured out. I think his anchor is what he is going to really need to be able to work on. He's an interior guy. He's going to be an interior guy. You're going to get moved around, and you're going to get collapsed, and you're going to become a problem for the defense. More than you are going to be a problem for the offense if you can't stay on your feet. And that's going to be what he's going to need to be able to bring to the table, is to be a better run anchor.
It's going to be fun to watch him progress in his career, that's for sure. Coach, who do you got next?
Well, we are talking about a guy that really, throughout this process, early on, really this guy at one time was the number 1 defensive line prospect on most people's early boards. But Leonard Taylor III is a diverse defensive line prospect out of Miami, Florida, 6'4", 303, redshirt sophomore. He's a local. He's a Miami native, 5-star recruit. He was really, really bannered and coveted in the recruiting process out of high school. He's a 2-time All-ACC prospect, or All-CC selection, 64 career tackles, 22.5 career tackles for loss. So, I mean, if you look at that kind of ratio, he is definitely a home run hitter. 6 career sacks, 39 career stops, 49 career quarterback pressures. Those don't jump off the board, but we're talking about a redshirt sophomore. We're talking about a guy that really has 2 years of work to his name, because one of his seasons was kind of stunted by an injury. He's an absolute physical specimen. He's truly at 6'4", 303. It's a different looking 303 pounds. That you can attest for by looking and researching Leonard Taylor. Very good interior pass rusher. He's very good at it. He really does a good job, specifically from the inside. Great burst and explosiveness. That's what got him that 5-star rating. He's that kind of an athlete. Amazing short area quickness. That shuttle, that side to side. He and the Chris Jenkinses and the Rukaroros are just phenomenal in those areas. He's really rocked up NFL ready body. So he's ready to go. He's ready to go and get his look. Powerful anchor, plays with a really good, strong run base. But he still plays rather raw. He lost a full year to an injury, to an ACL injury. His second year was stunted because of that. So he's, again, a guy that really can use some more coaching and tutelage and some more mentoring and modeling, informing that way, shaping. He's going to struggle with the elite run blockers. He's just going to. That's a match in there that is likely to lose at this point in time, just because technically he's not quite there yet. He can play with poor leverage, either inside and out. So there's times where, and there are clips I've seen him where he just gets moved out of there against superior offensive linemen. And that was at the college level. People love his athleticism so much and his high volume of tackles for loss in the short body of work. But there's still a lot of clips of this guy getting blocked good, Drew. And he can get into stalemates. He can kind of be a patter and a patty cake player, so to speak, in the old language of defensive line talk. He can kind of stalemate and lock in there at times too, which is something that's not all that uncommon in young defensive linemen. That's something they have to work themselves out of. But Leonard Taylor III is still kind of doing that. I think he is likely, I think probably a day 2 guy. He has the athleticism to be a day 1 player, but he is likely to be a day 2 prospect, is what we're seeing right there.
Physicality is what I think about with Taylor. And like you talked about, Coach. So seeing him go to say he has day 1 talent, absolutely he does. The inconsistencies in his play likely make him a day 2 prospect. Depending on the numbers game, I mean, I don't want to speculate too far, but I mean, I could see him being a possible round 4 guy, early round 4 guy. I cannot see him going past that though. I just not seeing it. He's too athletic, too good. He's gonna immediately be a rotational guy at the very least, no matter who gets him. So he's a solid prospect. Coach, I wanted to talk about Dwayne Carter out of Duke. The ACC, normally a basketball program, but we know their football program certainly has improved immensely over the last 5 to 10 years. He's a 6'2", 302-pound senior out of Ohio, Pickerington, Ohio. Ran a 4.99 40. So he's a 2-time All-American, a 3-time All-CC player, 3-time academic All-ACC. Not shocked by that going to Duke, but at the same time, that's very impressive. To excel in the classroom and on the field, which speaks to players' football IQ. Let's face it, some guys are very instinctive, but some guys can process and are let's face it, the more you can absorb, the better you are on the field, the more you can kind of see things that happening as they unfold ahead better than others. So it's very important. 126 career tackles, 25 for loss, 12 career sacks. 11 pass breaks up, 11 forced fumbles, and 4 fumble recoveries. So this is a guy he's a disruptor. 66 career stops and 118 career quarterback pressures. That jumps off the page for me a little bit there. Dwayne Carter is definitely a guy that you have to be concerned about when he's lining up against you. He's a 3-year captain, Coach. He has a prolific pass rush profile. So he's very good rushing the quarterback. Plays with great leverage. He's got good size. He's not overly tall, but he's got a very good size, 6'2", 302. We talked about guys like that earlier. He's excellent. He has excellent power in his punch and a punch and press dynamo in college. So Gotta like that. So as soon as that ball snapped, folks, he's on it. He's making a move, and it's an impactful move on the guy in front of him. So very good there on pass rush. He's an excellent base bull rusher. So he's got good power in his legs. Very good power. He's relentless. Tremendous repertoire and counter moves in the pass rush. So he's good with his hands, sound tackler, and very instinctive and reactionary. Again, that ties into, when you're all academic, you're probably pretty good at processing, and that's a good thing for Dwayne Carter as well. What does he need to work on? Well, he needs to keep refining his hand juice. Obviously, playing in the ACC, he played against a lot of elite players. He's going to be playing against elite players every day at practice and in every game. So, like anything, your strengths still need to be worked on to get better. It's not so much a weakness, but he just needs to be able to take it to the next level along with his physicality. Struggled on the edge. He struggled on the edge and against inside guys. So, being 6'2", 302, probably not the frame you're really expecting a lot of pass rush ability from the edge. More of an inside guy, but again, he's kind of a tweener, so not the quickest laterally. So that's where maybe a Chris Jenkins differentiates himself from a Dwayne Carter. Much better laterally, coach. But I like Dwayne Carter. I see him as possibly an early day 3 gem. What were your thoughts on Carter?
Yeah, he's prolific, absolutely prolific from a standpoint of his statistics. I mean, he played so much football at Duke, and you can just see it. Statistically, he's a dynamo there. A highly decorated player from a career standpoint over there. Is he? He's 6'2", 302. And there could be some size differential. That just doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not able to be effective at certain sizes. It doesn't. It doesn't. However, are his measurables more related in relation to his ability? Are they going to be quite the same as maybe some of these other guys? That's probably a tier difference there. Now, technically speaking, he's amazing. He's very refined. He is a guy that is going to have to be technically excellent. And he's been able to rely on ability, too, out of the ACC at Duke. It's not all been, just his technique and his effort and his anchor. Those things are going to be what are going to have to be maximized through his technique.
Yeah, I see the New England Patriots version of Trey Flowers here when I see Dwayne Carter a little bit similar size.
Yeah, so I think that's a good comparison.
Could be some good upside there. So definitely like Dwayne Carter though, for sure. Coach, you got one more. Let's talk about him.
Well, this is another guy that I like, and I really look at kind of what we may look to do in regards to enhancing our defensive line and the area of which we can do it. This is a player that comes to mind for me, and that is Mason Smith out of LSU. 6'6", 315-pound redshirt sophomore. So we're talking about another guy that doesn't have a ton of miles on him. He's a defensive lineman. He's very alignment versatile. So brings an alignment versatility, phenomenal size. And he's a young, moldable, and more impressionable player, too. He's out of Houma, Louisiana. So he's a Louisiana product. Runs a 5 flat or near 5 flat 40, 501 40 at 6'6", 315. So another high caliber, very athletic guy. We'll get to that in a minute. He was a freshman All-American in his first year. 9.5 career sacks. 9.5 career tackles for loss. 6.5 career sacks. 24 career stops. 35 career pressures. He played 2 seasons in 1 game. That's what he's played so far. 2 seasons in 1 game. So he's got a very small football window that's been open for him so far. Amazing size and athleticism for a 6'6", 315 defensive lineman type player. A great length and strength. Those that he plays with a combo, and that's what gets him out on the edge. He can get out there and do some things out there. He's a great closer. Plays with great closing speed. He's a squeezer. He can really, and that really speaks to his run anchor and his ability to anchor as a run defender. He can touch 11 feet from a standing vertical leap. This is a freak athlete. So he can be just from flat-footed, flex and jump and reach 11 feet. Been clocked at 19 and a half miles an hour on the field. Wow. We want to know why your careers are getting shorter. He's 6'6", 315 and can get to that speed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's saying something right there. Plays with good pad level. Plays with really good pad level for a guy his size. He's an agile and powerful run stopper. Better in the run than he is against the pass, but he's got this tremendous spin move, which is going to free him up. And he's going to be able to make plays in the backfield and on quarterbacks with that as well, which also probably puts him more on the inside. You don't see a lot of great spinning is a little bit more of a dangerous thing on the edge, but really intriguing that way. He's very raw green player. Like we said, he's played 2 seasons in 1 game. So he's very moldable. Is he going to be turned into just a true defensive tackle? He could be. Is he going to be used as an alignment versatile player? He could be. That is entirely possible. But he's very green. He's not as teched up and as savvy as a football player, as a Dwayne Carter, so to speak. He's kind of the opposite that way. He can be over aggressive at times and kind of overrun things and overrun his technique and work himself out of plays because he just runs past it at times. And those are things, again, that are very common in a player that lacks experience. So those are things that you can expect to get better for Mason Smith as he progresses into his NFL career. He can lose his balance in his high pad level and get top heavy. Sort of talked about that with Braden Fisk, right? Some of those things are present in Mason Smith's game. He's been kind of tossed and turned and pinned and kind of walled in and loses balance sometimes. He can not quite be as explosive and twitchy as he's relied upon. So he's still kind of developing that motor, still kind of working himself out that way. And is a guy that wears down. Not an every down football player. But at that size and that athletic ability, you can definitely mold a tremendous package out of this guy. In your run or run stopping, your red zone, your goal line packages, short yardage stuff. Mason Smith is a guy I think you want on your football team.
Yeah, and before anybody comments that we misspelled Mason's name, that's how he spells it. So just want to make sure everybody knows that. He
goes with the 2 ways. I think that's a Louisiana thing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but lots to like about him. I agree with you, Coach. His size coupled with his ability are a very intriguing combination. To be able to get to that full speed of almost 20 miles an hour at that size, you're right. It's like getting into minor car accidents every play out there. My gosh, I mean, it's incredible. He's going to be an interesting prospect. I'm curious where he's going to go in the draft. Obviously higher up, there's going to be somebody who's real enamored with that combination. I think a lot of teams are, Coach. I think there's just trepidation as to whether he can consistently do it on the field, but that's how the draft works, right? I mean, guys like this, you got to have the aptitude to be able to see that. So in Detroit's case, we're going to trust Brad Holmes and company. If they get a Mason Smith in Detroit, I'm going to be really happy. I'm sure you will too, because that means they see a lot to like in Mason Smith, and he's definitely special physically. Let's wrap this one up with McKinley Jackson, Coach, the D lineman out of Texas A&M, the Aggie. His size, 6'2", 326-pound senior. Caught my eye right away. Caught my eye on film, quite frankly, out of Lucedale, Mississippi. So he didn't go too far away for school, but he's a 4-star prospect. He's a freshman all SEC member, so that's impressive, Coach. 2-time captain, 91 career tackles, 15 and a half career tackles for loss, 7.5 career sacks, 48 career stops, and a 55 career quarterback pressures. Considering his frame and what obviously he does well is a lockdown guy against the run, to be able to get the pressures there on top of that just adds another feather in his cap, a little more to his repertoire. He has a great first step. He's a quick penetrator, which is what enables him to do that. Very important. Very effective bull rusher. Being 326 pounds going up against you is going to be tough. He has a great feel for block destruction, so he's very instinctive. So we like that a lot. And a nuance for being of a gap penetrator. So again, more of that instinct. So his football IQ is really high. He's very good on the edge against the run. So this is good too. An excellent burst and twitch. So again, he's not for his size, he's a great athlete, but he's even better because he's got a quick, explosive first step, and that's awesome. He's very agile and athletic for his build too. So there's a lot to like about McKinley Jackson. So what does he need to work on? He does have limited pass rush repertoire. So he's been getting, in college, getting away with that first step and his athletic ability and his size. He's going to have to develop some techniques in order to be able to fight that off at the NFL level. He can be somewhat inconsistent versus double teams. So there you go. It touches into that. He's going to see a lot more of that in the NFL more than likely, especially if he can do some things well early. Teams will figure that out on tape really quick. So limited range and quickness at that size, that's what you're going to get. So this isn't somebody that's going to be running sideline to sideline. That's not what you're getting out of McKinley Jackson. Not a flexible 3-down edge, and he's a little inconsistent with his hands. So again, he's been able to get away with some things, coach, at the college level that he's going to have to refine at the NFL level. But overall, McKinley Jackson are being a run stopper with some sneaky quarterback pressure in his repertoire and some techniques for pass rushing. I really like him a lot. I see him as a real solid early day 3 guy. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he's another really kind of ready to go run anchor. He's real like a gap penetrator, kind of a real good kind of pin the hip and go type guy. Of the blocker that he's trying to outmatch, and he's gonna be ready to go at that right away. He's ready now. So I mean, this is another player that kind of he really he was so highly touted. Very similar to kind of Leonard Taylor at the beginning. He was kind of one of these top 3 defensive line prospects that everybody was talking about as things kind of played out, and the underclassmen also declared and things. The pecking order kind of changed a little bit as it does in football. But McKinley Jackson, like I said, I don't see somebody that goes into day 3 here. And if somehow he did, it would be really quick in round 4. He's great run anchor.
Yeah, he's a nice player. I definitely wouldn't mind him in Detroit. We'll put it that way. Coach, going into this preview prior to free agency, this was going to be like we talked about earlier to wrap this up. This was going to be a huge focal point position for the Lions. It still is, but I think they've addressed the starting position. Now you're looking at depth and future now, which is a better place to be in. But overall, Coach, your thoughts on this draft class this position draft class before we close it out?
I like it. I think there's some real good football players to be had here. Am I interested? I'm very interested in a good lot of them. Let's be real. I mean, DJ Reader's here on what is it, a 2-year deal?
Mm-hmm.
So yep. I mean, we're not talking long term. We have other players that are going to be coming off sometime soon. So roles could develop into something a little bit more. Aleem McNeil too. I mean, he's a guy that's battled some injuries. We need some depth that just you had alluded to. That's very important. Where we get it from, I think there's some sources here in this draft. So, I mean, I could see a good still going, somewhere maybe day 2 on defensive line. I'm expecting it more to be something that we still address. And I think, the edge position, at edge, again, Marcus Davenport was a 1 year, a 1 year contract. So, I mean, we're still looking at guys, in this position group or this position area for us here with the Lions. But as a whole, I really like it, and I'm intrigued to see where these guys kind of place out.
Yep, gonna be a fun class to watch, no doubt about that. And it's gonna be real interesting to see how the Lions address it in the draft. But we're very pleased with what they've done in free agency. So we shall see in 5 weeks. So for Coach Andy Shield, Marine City Mariners, my name is Drew. Take care, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and we will talk to you soon. This has been the Sports Peninsula Podcast. To subscribe to the podcast, simply click the subscribe button on our YouTube channel's homepage and give us a like. You can also follow our audio podcast on multiple platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Google Podcasts, just to name a few. Give us a follow on Twitter. Our handle is @SportsPodcast to check out our latest releases. Thank you again for watching and for your support. Remember, when you want to hear all about sports in the great state of Michigan, there is only one Sports Peninsula Podcast.